right, thank you very much. As you can see, we are team believers. And with Olivia, Mel, and I, we will argue that more EO data, more tech and analytics will solve all our planetary problems. I guess we would argue that there's still many Earth system behaviors that we don't yet fully understand. So we need more, and in particular, even better EO data that we can measure, with which we can measure more aspects of Earth system with even more precision. But at the same time, of course, we need to constantly adapt and evolve to use even more sophisticated tools and analytics to process often even larger satellite data sets of multiple EO sources that sometimes are collected even more frequently and of higher resolution, and that our data archives will fill up very quickly. But it also needs to be easier to use for many more people. So it's a bit of an interesting position we are, but a good example, for instance, is hyperspectral imaging data, which is, as many of you probably know, is an emerging data set that provides extremely high spectral resolution optical data set with lots of promise. And ideally, we would like to be able to access that data globally in an open data form, because it can enable a lot of new applications we haven't been able to do, like better tracking of biodiversity change on land and underwater. Mineral exploration, of course, has traditionally been used for that. And also, of course, better water quality monitoring, and not monitoring only, but measurement, direct measurement using imaging spectroscopy techniques. But it comes with a lot of problems and challenges primarily, which is that we need to overcome the big data analytics problem, especially if we want to do global mapping missions. This is a massive problem to not just collect the data, but also downlink it to Earth. We need better calibration infrastructure and better processing standards. But I guess we'd like to argue that we are almost there to and pretty much developing the tools already that can enable us to do this. You can imagine the Bureau of Meteorology sucking in 25 live data streams from Earth observation satellites to give us several days ahead in forecast. So imagine how many more data sets would enrich, and how far into the future can we predict weather and climate into the future. So we would argue that we need, in addition to that, a lot more sovereign data systems that we can use to collect our own data for our own purposes, and therefore also grow our space industry. So we can't solve this together, but we want to work with the global community and contribute more data globally to solving our planetary challenges. I rest my case. Thank you, Eva.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate it. We're going to go now quickly to our speaker for the no, and that's Yvonne. Yvonne, when you're ready.
Thank you, Eva. So our team, we are the realists, we're the glass half empty kind of people. I've been trying very hard to remember not to drink from that glass, but we believe that more EO data, tech, and analytics alone does not change people's opinions or their actions. So what you say, Alex, about needing more and better and larger and more frequent, higher resolution of observation data to understand systems that we don't understand, your words, Alex, it's like wanting a better jackhammer to crack a nut. So needing better data is not the same as needing more data, which is what we are arguing against. And so my main arguments will be that EO, tech, and analytics can detect and display, but not action, as well as the need to effectively communicate data, as well as ensure that this data is accessible to people. Jasmine will then be arguing that not all planetary challenges are technological problems, as well as the issue of data quality. So as I've said, EO, tech, and analytics can detect and display, but not action. 2020 was one of the Earth's hottest year on record at 1.02 degrees Celsius above the baseline 1951 to 1980 mean, and was fraught with wildfires, droughts, storms, and glacier melt. The last 7 years since 2014 have been the warmest 7 years on record. EO data and analytics can tell us these figures and show what global temperatures look like on a pretty map. But having this information alone does not mean that people, organizations, or governments will act on it to solve the climate emergency. Australia set a target to reduce emissions to 26 to 28% below 2005 levels by 2030, even though the recommended target based on scientific evidence was 45 to 65%. Someone looked at the data and went, okay, cool story, bro, but I'm gonna pick my own figures to action on anyway. So evidently having data, more data or more tech does not necessarily lead to action, which will solve planetary challenges. Which brings me to my next point, that data needs to be fair. By that, I mean findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Having more data will not be useful if they are not any of these four things. It also needs to be communicated effectively. Scientists and data analysts can do tons of analyses and produce hundreds of results with all these additional data, but no challenges will be solved if these results are not communicated effectively to the key stakeholders who are able to effect change. So in conclusion, apart from having more data, tech, and analytics, there also needs to be action, good accessible data, and effective communication in order to begin solving planetary challenges. Thank you.
Fantastic, Yvonne, and you are just before the end of your timer, which is amazing. So well done using all your time and loving the background as well to illustrate the point. Great, let's go to Olivia on the team. Yes, Olivia, if you can get ready, your time starts now.
Thank you. So I understand the points about action and communication and accessibility, and hopefully we'll address some of those in this argument. Essentially, we don't need any old type of data or technology or analytics. We need the right type. So how do we find the right type? Well, the answer is innovation, by exploring a diversity of technology and data and analytics approaches and seeing what works. So innovation management practitioners know that you can't pick the winners without investing in the losers. And for every home run idea, there are at least 24 ideas that weren't home runs. For example, Nespresso, it was a massive hit for Nestle, but they haven't had a similar success for nearly 30 years. So what will be the next espresso of Earth observation, and how do we find it? Well, we need to create the right conditions for as many people as possible to explore and experiment. And to do that, we have to remove some barriers to entry. Several of these barriers are cost and skills and knowledge. And essentially, we need to make it cheaper and less complex for people to incorporate Earth observation into their decision-making processes. So the question is, well, how do we make it cheaper? More technology. As the Earth observation industry grows, it will drive down the cost of Earth observation data. And how do we make it less complex? Well, we need to build abstraction layers that hide the underlying technology, essentially technology that makes the complexity invisible, just like GPS in your phone, where few people understand how it works, but everybody uses it. And also by releasing some more decision-ready data products like maps of water quality, harmful algal blooms, and sustainable farming. So such products are going to help us understand things like, where is water quality poor so that we can warn people? When will a red tide hit a fish farm so that they can harvest beforehand? And which farming practices are maintaining local biodiversity instead of harming it, so that we can encourage more farms to adopt these practices? And of course, to build these types of data products, we do need more of the right type of data. Now, pixels in hyperspectral images are not just extra colourful squares, they're samples of the Earth and the things on it. So hyperspectral sensors enable us to measure composition and not just visible properties. So in summary, by diversifying the Earth observation ecosystem, we can help to build resilience into society and learn to better manage our impact on the planet.
Fantastic, Olivia. You guys have done an amazing job at keeping to time. This is great, well done, and great counter argument. Let's go now to Jasmine for the on the team No to respond to Olivia. Jasmine, when you're ready.
Thanks, Eva. So I'd like to argue that even if we have more data, more Earth observation and analytics, not all of the problems that we're trying to solve are actually requiring that data. So to solve those problems, we don't actually need that data. So who of you has seen the news today? It's all a bit bleak at the moment. It's pretty much all disasters, disease and war. And this is all we seem to have been seeing in the news cycle for the past months, even years. More EO analytics and tech aren't going to solve these challenges. Today we're holding this event virtually because half of Australia is in lockdown due to COVID-19. Having more data isn't going to solve the challenge of how to stop an infectious disease spreading. It doesn't care that you have data. That's not what's going to stop it spreading. EO data has been used to monitor and track the spread through initiatives such as the Group on Earth Observations Community Response. However, it is the human decisions and actions such as vaccination, masks and social distancing that have been helpful in reducing the spread around the world. This is not more data, tech or analytics. We're not even searching for the right type of Earth observation data to do this. It's just not applicable to this problem. Climate change and the associated increase in natural disasters is one of the most significant challenges our world currently faces. On New Year's Day 2020, Australia awoke to the Black Summer's nightmare, a nation on fire. Images of red skies and walls of flame made the news across the country, while thousands of people fled their homes or sheltered indoors to avoid the smoke. $2.26 billion in claims were made across the country, and 2019 and 2020 is the worst season on record for natural disasters in Australia. Having more Earth observation data and analytics won't stop the fires. It can tell us where they are or where they are likely to occur, but it's the tireless efforts of firefighters that will put them out and careful management that will prevent them. While monitoring with Earth observation data and analytics can help, it's not going to solve the problem. Over the next several years, thousands of new satellites are planned to be sent into space. For Earth observation to help solve planetary challenges, we also need to consider the political, economic and logistics challenges with using the data. What data do our planetary challenges need? Earth observation is just part of a much broader picture, and communicating the value proposition is critical to its uptake. I would argue that making Earth observation data and analytics simple for people to use, understand and take action on is what will allow Earth observation to help solve the problems our planet faces. I'll stop there.
Wonderful, thank you, Jasmine, and also right on time. Well done, thanks for your contribution. We're going to go now to Melanie to try to prove Jasmine wrong. So Melanie, you're closing the round for your team. You're going to have an extra minute whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Eva, and thanks, Jasmine. So I'm going to really bring home that more EO data, analytics, and more tech is the solution to all of our planetary challenges. And just bringing back on what Jasmine just said, if we have more tech to remove some of the barriers to data access that many people have, this is completely broadens the scope of EO scientists that are currently there. And that will really empower the world to not only understand the challenges, but ignite more innovation to solve them. And the way you do that is through more tech to put abstraction layers in so people can understand what they're working to, translate the data. So it's not a complex GPS number of strings. It's people see it as position, they can understand it, they can use it. We can employ technology to put new technologies such as hyperspectral imaging, which will really enable completely new avenues into access for diversity tracking, biodiversity tracking, mineral tracking, and translate what we understand as a satellite EO image as just a picture. No, it's not just a pixel. A pixel is actually a sample of the Earth. It's not just a colorful square anymore. And with more bands, we can manage more composition, not just the pure visual properties. Layer that with more data, more analytics, more ideas out there, we can actually evolve and adapt to what the future challenges will be. Because the world's in all sorts of strife with climate change, we're seeing pandemics, all sorts of big challenges impacting the human race. But if you don't have the tools to adapt and monitor and the technology to build that fundamental understanding of what's going on, how can you even start to enact solutions to those? So my argument is that technology and analytics can solve challenges. It can lead to direct action. And as Olivia mentioned, just some basic things of knowing where do we need to put in national parks? Are some of our farming policy changes actually working? If we have EO data out there that can be quickly piped up to the hands of decision makers to see, is policy working? All of a sudden you've got that feedback loop and we can better understand and enact change, direct change purely through technology, EO data and analytics. So can EO data, more tech and more analytics evolve to solve our planetary challenges? Heck yes, it can. And by diversifying our Earth observation ecosystem, we will build resilience into society that will then enable us to better manage our impact on Earth. This is about training up a new generation of EO scientists and redefining what EO is in a language that the rest of the world can understand. And more tech, analytics, and EO data will do that.
Great, thanks, Melanie. Super passionate contribution there, and closing with 2 minutes left. We're going to go now to the last speaker on the NOAA team, and that's Peter Scott. Peter, you've got 4 minutes, and whenever you're ready.
Cool, thank you. Hey, look, we've heard a number of data-driven arguments from team believers, and they have been really data-driven. Alex argued initially that to understand systems we don't understand, we need more data, better data, larger data, more frequent, higher resolution, hyperspectral data. And I think really this is a misunderstanding between data and the information that is required to actually solve the planetary issues of our own. We can't just get more pixels and more bands. They're actually real issues that we need to solve, and we need to, it's a societal issue. Olivia argued that sort of more data and easier access along the same lines will facilitate the data use. And yes, that's true. We see that with the data cube and a whole lot of other initiatives to enable the uptake of data. But the problem is that things like mapping water quality issues doesn't actually solve the water quality issues. You just know where there's a problem. And to actually solve the issue, you need to actually talk to people. You need to talk to farmers. You need to look at policy-driven solutions. And finally, Melanie, I guess, talked about how we needed more tech to remove the barriers and get more innovation to solve these problems. But the same thing is we need the tech can only help understand sort of simple sort of textbook Earth observation problems. It's the complex, wicked problems that are the planetary issues that like climate change and pandemics that we really need to solve. And more data just keeps us scientists busy. So I suppose to wrap up with our team, so Yvonne talked about how planetary challenges are wicked problems. And for those sort of problems, Earth observation technology can detect and display some of the issues, but only act as a problem recognizer, not really as a problem solver. For an example, there's no Earth observation derived answer to climate change. The best our community can do is effectively communicate Earth observation derived information to help stakeholders and policymakers recognize the problem and make sure that the data that comes out is fair, findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So while I can use my phone to look up the weather, it's really up to me to make the decision, whether I want to put up an umbrella, which you can't really see on Zoom, or whether I need to go out and wear a hat. Earth observation won't actually solve the problems involved with that. Jasmine reinforced this message, noting that many sort of planetary challenges cannot be solved by technology alone, or even at all. So our community, we can track the spread of COVID. We can get our binoculars out and look for the little COVID bugs. We can detect burnt areas. I like props. It's very hot. We can do things like that. We can even map floods. We can go, oh, it's wet. There's a flood there, but we can't actually solve the underlying issues that cause my glass of water to fall on my head with Earth observation. For that, we need to guide human decisions and actions with responsive, unbiased, reliable, calibrated, and validated data to mediate the socio-political process without amplifying many of the existing biases in society, which are coming through now in a lot of these machine learning data sets. Our team, the realists, with our glasses even more half empty now, because I've just tipped it over my head, have made it abundantly clear in this debate that the more EO data, more tech and analytics alone won't solve or change people's opinions or their actions, and clearly will not solve all our planetary challenges. Thank you all.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peter. I see your short sleeves, so you shouldn't be feeling too cold there with all of your water running over your face.
Yeah, I got a towel.
Well, I can see a lot of activity in the chat. It looks like Peter's performance may have stolen some of the votes, and not only the performance, but the arguments. Great work to both teams. This was exceptional and truly full of knowledge and full of passion. So I'm so happy that I get to moderate this debate. I think we're going to now go into voting again. So Karen just put in the link to voting. I'm sure you're having a hard time making a decision because both teams have really put a lot of arguments to convince us. Have a little bit of a think and put your vote down. We're going to wait a couple of minutes. We're tracking well on time, and there were a couple of questions in the chat that I think would be worth picking up for a further discussion with our speakers. So I'm just going to give you 30 seconds to go into that while we look at those questions, and while we look at there's another question here that perhaps we can start to cover in Go Soapbox. And maybe while you all vote, I'm going to throw this to our speakers. People are very keen to know to which side of the fence you actually sit on, because people arguing in both fronts may or may not hold the views that they've presented and supported today. So I'm going to go around my screen of what I can see. Actually, I'm going to follow the same order to make sure I don't leave anyone, and go and ask one by one. Either you're truly a yes, are you truly a no, or maybe you are a not sure, because there was another option. So Alex, are you really a believer, or are you a non-believer?
I'm always an optimist and a believer, because I think Peter wouldn't know when to hang his clothing outside for drying if he didn't have an accurate weather forecast, which needs a lot of data.
Great, thank you, Alex. Yvonne?
I think more data is not a bad thing, but at the same time, we do need those other things that our team has mentioned, the action, the communication, for then eventually solve problems. So
do I take that as a not sure?
I'll take that as a just data alone, data and tech alone will not solve our problems. Yeah.
Great. So you're sitting in the right side of the fence. Olivia, how about you?
I think we do definitely need more data and technology and analytics, but I agree that it's more of a hygiene factor. So the data and the tech, the analytics is all kind of table stakes, but to convert from that insight into some sort of action, we definitely need people who kind of study that aspect and can basically reduce the modes of failure, if you like, in getting from insight through to action.
Great, thank you. Jasmine, how about you?
Similar to Yvonne, I think more data is a good idea, but it's not necessarily going to solve all our problems. We need to focus on what people are trying to solve and work out the ways they want to use the data to solve those problems for it to work.
Yeah, great. What do you think, Melanie? Where are you actually sitting?
Yeah, I'm definitely a believer. I do think that more tech and analytics is essentially the enabler to A, understand our problems, and B, attempt to solve them. And just a quick comment, I've seen a lot of in the chat here about the operationalization side, and that is absolutely critical, but I would class that as part of the tech development and doing more tech to make sure that some of these products move from a prototype stage into something that we can actually use routinely and reliably, not just have fleeting information spikes that are calibrated. So I think that all comes under tech, and we can do it. It's just going to take time and energy.
Great. Thanks, Melanie. And Peter, was your performance truly, supported by your beliefs?
Yeah, no, it was. Look, I think more data and analytics are great if you're mapping simple things. That might be, the height of a tree or tree cover, all those sorts of things. But for planetary challenges, or even just local challenges, they're wicked problems. They're problems where people don't agree or the science is uncertain. You can't solve that with more tech. You've got to go out and talk to people and try and understand, the human processes or the ecological processes that are happening. So I'm sort of firmly on for planetary challenges. I think it's EO data can help illuminate the problem, but it won't help solve it.
Yeah, great. I'm just going to go to Karen and see if she prepares the results. But before we close, I wanted to throw oh, here you go. We've got results in 50%. Oh, no, that's something else. Sorry. Before we go into the results, I wanted to ask you something that was happening in the chat and that I would like to hear your thoughts on. So, you know, we've been talking about Earth observation and seeing Earth observation. I'm looking at it, Earth observation from satellite for a long time. A lot of applications discuss the satellites put up, not by Australia, unfortunately, but by other countries. And there's this promise that this market, the satellite, the services coming from Earth observation is going to be huge, in the billions of dollars. We haven't yet seen that happen. Why do you think that is the case? And I'm going to look at the more tech, more data, more analytics, because we can keep having a lot of more tech, more data and analytics, but that penetration and the turning all of that into solutions and services that people are using and willing to pay and that exploit are not yet there. So I would just like to throw to everyone, and if anyone has a strong view, yeah, to jump on and hear a couple of opinions in that regard. Anyone wants to go first? Yeah, sure.
So, you know, we sort of tend to kind of joke that there's a 20/80 rule going on, where maybe 20% of the battle is the technology and the data and the analytics, and the other 80% is the more human-centered issues. A lot of the people that I speak with in industry, they sort of go through stages where we first say, oh, have you considered using space technology to solve this problem? And they'll say, oh, isn't that, you know, looking at satellites and planets and things? And then we'll say, no, you can look at Earth. And then we'll show them a photo of the Earth and they'll say, oh, wow, I can see a tree from a satellite. That's amazing. And so there's this sort of, you know, educational process that we go through, but pretty quickly those same people start to think up lots of different ways they could use Earth observation data. So I think that, you know, trying to translate some of that and unlock some of that value into real world value, you know, it does come back to working with people and to help people to work out what the possibilities are in their domain, and to also reduce kind of what I sometimes refer to as sort of like fear of data. You know, people think, oh, that's not something I can do. It must be something that someone else, you know, maybe more intelligent or knowledgeable than I will do. So that's a lot of the time that we spend with clients, at least, is helping them through that journey of really believing that, you know, they can use Earth observation data. And then pretty quickly we see some, you know, excitement and that they kind of take off.
Yeah, great. Just very quickly before we go to the results, because we've got the results in, anyone on the No team would like to give your thoughts on this? Maybe.
I'll jump in. So we do a lot of industry engagement with Frontier SI. One of the things that we have found is that sometimes the language around Earth observation isn't very accessible for people with a non-technical background. So it's about learning to explain it in a way that people not from the Earth observation sector will be able to understand. So that might be adjusting the way you're talking about an image, or just explaining it in really common terms about what it could actually do and how it can help them solve their problem that they're looking for an answer to. And the other thing is decision makers, the people at the tops of these organizations, aren't often aware of what Earth observation can do. So it needs to really get to that level within an organization before it can have impact.
Great. Thank you, Jasmine. We've got results in, and we actually have a clear winner. And drum roll, the negative team, the No team, is the clear winner, and they actually managed to move people that were yes sure to no, and even those that weren't unsure to no. So well done. I've got a feeling that the props really helped there, but the narrative and how you structure. So great job. I think perhaps we can all agree that it's not a black or white answer, and that there is a lot that can be done around education and evangelization and getting people and the public to understand that this is not just satellites looking out, that it's satellites looking down, and that what you're seeing is not just a picture, that there's a lot of information that you can get out of there, and hopefully this community can continue to work together to do that job and to make it more accessible to everyone.